Welcome to our seminar recording called Early Learning and Childcare for Newcomer Families and Children, a Pan-Canadian Environmental Scan. This work was completed at the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Centre at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, funded by the Child, Youth, Refugee Research Coalition, or CIRC, as part of a partnership grant through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. This seminar is presented by Dr. Jucely McIsaac, Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Early Childhood, Diversity and Transitions with the Faculty of Education and Department of Child and Youth Study at the Mount St. Vincent University, Nahal Fakhari, Research Coordinator at Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center and PhD student at Dalhousie University, and Milena Pimentel, Research Assistant at Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center and Honors Student at the Department of Child and Youth Study at Mount St. Vincent University.
Now that housekeeping is done, I did want to take some time here at the top of the presentation to provide a land acknowledgement. Our research is situated here at Mount St. Vincent University in Mi'kma'ki on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Walawistowick Maliseet peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact, it recognized the Mi'kmaq and Walawistowick Maliseet titles and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. And we'd also like to pay respect to the histories, contributions, and legacies of African Nova Scotian communities that have been here for over 400 years and the 52 African Nova Scotian communities throughout the region today. I also wanted to take some time to recognize that childcare programs and settlement agencies and organizations that participated in this study are located across Indigenous lands. And we do respect and honor the histories, languages, and cultures of all Indigenous people across Turtle Island as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation. Okay, so with the introductions and such aside, the plan for our seminar today is to lead you through the story of our research, to talk about some of the context of the work, what we did, our environmental scan, what that included in terms of the population of settlement organizations that we had participate in our project, and then share some of the findings with respect to the innovative models across the country, some of the strengths and challenges that were identified, and some recommendations that we found as part of the process of going through the results of the work. And then at the end, we did want to leave some time for questions and discussion. As I mentioned, we have such a rich audience today with so much to share in terms of experiences with delivering childcare with newcomer families. And we're really excited about this opportunity to start to engage in a discussion about some of your experiences. So all of that in the next 48 minutes, as we know that that you probably have a busy day. So to tell you a bit about our story and how we got to here. So as I mentioned, I'm a researcher at Mount St. Vincent University. And as part of my research chair position, I established the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center, or the ECCRC, in 2018, so 5 years ago. And through this research, we do work that looks at really advocating for child well-being across lots of different domains. And in our work, we engage families, we work with partners in the community and in government, to try to think about the ways that we can learn from different initiatives happening in the field with respect to early childhood and those that look at ways to enhance child well-being. So that's kind of the general sense of what we do at ECCRC. In one of the very first projects that we did here at the center, we reached out to our local settlement agency, the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia, or ISANS, to look for ways to partner with them to better understand the needs of newcomer families that have young children. So we reached out to them with an interest to work together and to learn from the experiences of families. So we co-designed a project that used photo voice, which is a participatory methodology that really that uses photos as a way to document and to share experiences. And we had the opportunity in this project to speak with early childhood educators that were working at iSANS in their childcare program, and also families with young children to learn more about their experiences. And the 3 photos right after the number 3 there are examples of some of the work that was done through that Photo Voice project that really helped us to better understand some of the experiences of families as they navigate and try to access the supports they need for their young children. Through that project, the results are available on our website, and we'll share some links afterward. But in that project, we continued to explore ways to work more closely with our settlement agency here, iSANS. And through ongoing conversations, one of the things that they were curious about was how other settlement agencies were delivering their childcare programs and the ways that they might be able to adapt implementation as they continue to look for ways to better support newcomer families. So that led to this idea of, let's talk to others across the country about how they're delivering childcare and learn more about some of the things that are going really well, and also the things that they may be experiencing some challenges with, to identify ways that both iSANS and perhaps others might be able to learn about how to better support newcomer families with childcare. So that's sort of the rationale of how we got to here. So we applied for some funding from the Child and Youth Research Refugee Coalition, or CIRC, which is funded through a SSHRC partnership grant. And we had the opportunity to have some funds to actually implement this research project. So we know, and those of you joining that are situated in early learning and childcare certainly know this, that childcare can be positioned as a really essential part of supporting family settlement, and also serve as a support for children's social and emotional development. But there's really limited research that has explored how early learning and childcare has been implemented across the country, and the ways that we might need to adapt to best support the needs and the changing needs of newcomer families and children. And that certainly the changing needs also is important to note that all of this is in the backdrop of some of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare agreements that are happening across the country. So we know there's a lot of attention in the area of early learning and childcare, and a really important opportunity to think about how we can really respond at this time and going forward, really maximizing the opportunity to best meet the needs of newcomer families. So there's a lot of attention in this area. So we think that this research also comes at a really important time. So in this work, we wanted to learn, we wanted to understand how settlement agencies across Canada were delivering their childcare to support the needs of newcomer families. So we sought to respond to a couple of an objective and a couple of research questions, which are on the next slide. So one of our goals was to look at innovative approaches to early learning and childcare. So different ways that regions were responding to the needs of newcomer families and organizing their childcare programs to best support the needs of newcomer families. Our research questions there were 2. One was how. So what was the delivery model? What did it look like? How were settlement agencies delivering childcare across Canada? And also, what were some of the unique priorities for early learning and childcare to support newcomer families and children? So that really informs some of our recommendations. So how might we need to sort of think about new priorities, emerging priorities to best meet the needs of newcomer families? So to do this, we used an environmental scan approach that follows sort of a method that was used by others in research. So the environmental scan process included a website search and key informant interviews. So we first worked with a list of settlement agencies, and I share a bit more about this on the next slide. But in that, we used a Google advanced search to search key terms, and we developed our key terms in consultation with an evidence synthesis coordinator who has real expertise in searching the website for these types of things. And we use those search terms to identify information related to early learning and childcare implementation across the selected settlement agencies. So if we found information related to childcare on the organization's website, we took that information on the publicly facing website and summarized characteristics. And then we also invited those agencies to participate in an interview to validate the information found on the website and also provide an opportunity to further expand on the details. In some organizations, there wasn't any information that we could find on the website related to childcare. So in those instances, for those organizations, we sent them a survey where they could respond to some descriptive information related to the childcare. And then also they had the option of participating in a follow-up interview to further expand on the details that was in their survey. So in terms of how we recruited the settlement agencies to participate in our research, we connected with CMAS, which many of you might be familiar with, an organization that supports settlement childcare across the country. And they provided us with a list of settlement agencies across Canada who that provide childcare to families. So those organizations that were already connected with CMAS. And we were interested in speaking to organizations. As an initial start, we had to sort of provide a bit of boundary to the search to help us get started with the research. So we were interested in speaking to organizations that provide the care for newcomer children programs that follow the CMA's requirements and are funded by IRCC, or the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. So we had a list of 192 organizations across Canada, and we first did that step of looking at their website, and then depending upon what we found, we either contacted them, we either gathered information on the website and then contacted them for an interview, or we sent the organization a survey to complete information. In the end, we had 40 organizations, so 40 English and 4 Francophone organizations that were invited to participate in an interview. And that meant that the 40 organizations had some available information on the website that we were able to describe. And then 134 organizations were invited to complete a survey. And in the end, we had a response rate of about 20%, which isn't too bad with this kind of work where we didn't have a prior connection with agencies. And we had 38 agencies that provided complete information, whether it be in an interview or on a survey, to inform the results of the research. So on the next slide, I show a map of the participants in this study. So although this research is not complete, it's not every settlement agency that delivers childcare, we were happy about the spread of the agencies that were involved based on the list that we were provided. This really we saw as a first step of trying to better understand how childcare was delivered. There's certainly a need to do more and to better understand and fill in some gaps, but it still provides an interesting snapshot of childcare delivery across the country that's delivered in partnership with settlement agencies. So a total of 38 completed either an interview or a survey, and we collected these data between the months of May and August 2022. And in the process of this research, we've really found some interesting findings in relation to the ways in which funding models were organized to support the work of childcare in partnership with settlement agencies. There was a range of characteristics of the programs that participated in the programs. And following the webinar today, we're going to give you some links where we have the complete descriptive information that you can take a look at as well. We summarized characteristics in a description of programs across the country. And then we also conducted a thematic analysis to identify the perceived strengths, challenges, and innovative approaches of childcare programs that influence the accessibility, inclusion, and quality of early learning and childcare programs for newcomers. So to do this, we recorded the interviews, and we transcribed the interviews and took a thematic analysis approach, which was really trying to identify what some of the common findings were, what were some commonalities across the programs with respect to some of the strengths and challenges and innovative models or ways to sort of adapt to best meet the needs of newcomer families. And this analysis process helped us to make meaning of the results and help inform our research questions. So without further ado, I'm going to share it next to Nahal, who's going to get into some of the results of our scan.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessie. I'm going to continue our presentation on the things that we learned from the research. So through our conversation with the service providers and the survey, we learned a lot about how programs support newcomer families and their children. So our learnings you can see in this slide, is divided to 4 groups that I'm going to talk about them individually, but to just summarize it now, as the first one is program summary, which has detailed overall descriptive information around childcare delivery of the programs that participated in this study. These information includes topics around funding arrangements, CMAS requirements, fee eligibility criteria, and many more. The next one is called innovative models, which includes information around creative and innovative ways that organizations use with the resources that they have to best support newcomer families and their children. The third funding is around strength that service providers felt their programs have to support newcomer families and their children through childcare. And the final one, it's around the final findings is around the challenges that service providers identified and felt that they need to be addressed in order for them to better support newcomer families and their children. Can move to the next slide. So the program summary that we are going to talk about in the next 2 slides are just a few examples from the report. So the report has more details and include more boxes and topics around the overall descriptive information. These are just some of them that we felt are important to talk about as a group. So the first one, funding arrangement, we found that most programs receive funding from ELCC, but there are also some that receive from other sources like provincial, municipal, or community fundings. We also realized that many programs were offered free of charge to families, to newcomer families. Around CMAS requirements, we learned that most programs follow the CMAS requirements. In terms of the eligibility, most programs indicated that they have eligibility criteria that concern parents' characteristics, including their migration status or children age group, but there were some that they didn't have eligibility criteria. The final topic on this slide is the provincial licensing, which we found that most programs indicated that they follow CMAS requirements and they are not provincially licensed. But there were a few programs that were both provincially licensed and follow CMAS requirements, which we learned that there are organizations that are really interested in this model. We can go to the next slide. So then another topic was around trauma-informed approaches. So most programs indicated that they refer to trauma-informed practices and they define it by saying that the importance of being attentive and aware of family and children needs and their pre- and post-migration experiences. Program also discussed that they received support in delivering a trauma-informed program from consultants, CMAS webinars, or from trauma-informed professionals. Last but not least is around collaborations. So programs identify their within or outside partners and collaborators. Examples are like settlement support services like linked classes, language instruction for newcomers to Canada, other ELCC funded programs like employment training or workshops, outside organization like school and childcare, other organizations outside the program that provide informational sessions like safety safety education, parental education, and then other programs that are their focus is on children like libraries, intervention programs, public health, and resource center. As I mentioned, these are just a few examples of overall descriptive information. You can find more in the report. Also, at the end of the report, you can find more detailed and specific information for some organization that allowed us to use their name. So you can review those as well for more detailed information. You can go. Okay. So we call the second thing that we learned from this study innovative models. And I'm going to tell you how we learned about it. So as Jessie mentioned, all the interviews were audio recorded and transcribed word by word. Then we transferred all the survey information and interviews transcripts to the qualitative data analysis software to learn about the common experiences of program and services in supporting families and children. So we found that programs use innovative ways with the resources they have to support newcomer families and children. And these are three examples of the innovative model. So partnership and collaboration, trauma-informed care, and intentional use of space and materials are three innovative models that most talked about by the participants. So this slide includes participants' direct quotes on each innovative model. So for example, in terms of collaboration, one participant talked about their collaboration with school district, which they described to be essential to the program's success. This partnership supported their ability to secure spaces within elementary schools and hire qualified staff. Also, it included with help with the transportation, arrangements for guest speakers, and easier access to other services. The schools district also helped the newcomer families to navigate the childcare programs based on their eligibility. The next model, the next innovative approach was identified was the trauma-informed lens. So, for example, programs highly valued the importance of using trauma-informed care with newcomer families and their children. So they intentionally seek professional development for their staff to learn about trauma-informed work. Lastly, organizations discussed their intentional use of space and material to support gross motor space. So in case of this last code, you see the organization, despite not having access to outdoor play, they use indoor toys or equipment that allow children to engage in gross motor activities. So that's all for me, and I'm going to pass it to Melina to talk about the last two findings around strengths and challenges.
Thanks so much, Nahal. So yeah, I'll continue with discussing the strengths and then move into the challenges in delivering early learning and childcare to newcomer families, children and families that participants in our study discussed either during their interviews or when they completed their surveys. The themes in each of the categories, strengths and challenges, were also derived through the same qualitative process that informed our innovative models that Nahal just mentioned. So let's begin. Participants felt that newcomer families and children were comfortable and supported accessing childcare programs offered by agencies and organizations. Oftentimes, participants discussed that parents felt this comfort and support with organizations because they often had an understanding of the pre-migration experiences of families. Additionally, participants felt that the cultural diversity among staff was important in the support for families. This was thought to inform a deeper awareness of the needs of newcomer families and children and help their programs provide an environment that is culturally responsive and inclusive. For example, programs discuss the benefits of having educators who speak the first languages of the child and their family and being more attuned and intentional with materials to reflect the children and families accessing those programs. The first quote on the slide right here just discusses the benefits of having cultural diversity among their educators, who are often a newcomer themselves and who spoke the first languages of children and families. Moving on, mostly all participants discussed the educators in their programs as being knowledgeable, experienced, qualified, dedicated, and committed. Educators in the programs oftentimes did have an early childhood education certification according to the requirements to the province that they were located in. Participants described programs providing comprehensive programs, including childcare, but also enabling access to additional programs based on the individual needs of the families. So this wraparound support allowed educators to form really close and meaningful relationships with families and their children. And as you can see in the second quote, this participant talked about connecting with families, even if their children weren't with them and they were going to an appointment within the settlement agency or organization. Some participants described the environment as being welcoming and safe. Not only were materials intentionally selected, but the space was often described as inviting. And lastly, some participants said that the proximity of the childcare to the parents' programs, such as their linked classes, was beneficial as it sometimes helped children with that transition of going into a childcare space. Participants recognized the value of the accessibility of their program due to the long wait lists that many of us would know exist within our provinces. So as you can see in the last quote, this participant acknowledged that families with young children couldn't engage in other services their organization offered if they didn't have the access to a childcare program. So we'll go into challenges now. So though many programs discuss the benefits in having culturally diverse staff who may speak the first languages of children and families, sometimes the variety of language needs of families was noted by participants as a challenge. Educators had to find alternative ways of communicating with families. So we heard maybe using Google Translate just to ensure that families still had all the information that they needed. Participants felt that families encountered language-related challenges when filling out forms for their children or accessing other supports for their settlement, such as mental health supports. Some participants also discussed the difficulty for service providers to navigate the best support for families that was responsive to their pre-migration experience. A few participants also described challenges with distress from children and parents about separation when leaving their children in a childcare program, just because there was so much going on. They had just moved to a new country and then going into this early learning space with unfamiliar people at that beginning moment. This was felt to be a noteworthy challenge due to the trauma and pre-migration experience of some families. Most programs also discuss not having a separate outdoor space to engage in outdoor play. However, even if they did have access, such as like a playground nearby, they felt the regulations did not allow them to access these spaces. Limited outdoor space created a barrier for children to exercise their gross motor skills, and lack of physical space limited programs' ability to take in more families. So as you can see in that first quote, the participant was talking about having to turn away families because they may have reached their max capacity. Participants also reflected on insufficient funding. They noted that this created barriers for programs to access specialized support, offer fair compensation for their educators, and the ability to access professional development or additional professional development. Most programs were often not able to access provincial funding typically offered to childcare programs as they were not provincially licensed, as Nahal mentioned in the program summary. And then just to finish this off, additionally to not being provincially licensed, this led to barriers for some programs to access inclusion support and development or intervention services for children and families that were using their program. So as you can see in this second quote, this participant discussed the challenges in having supports come into their childcare center rather than going into the family's homes to deliver their service. So I'll pass it back to Jessie Lee now to further discuss our recommendations.
Thanks so much, Nahal and Melina. So I'm going to move on to some of the recommendations based on the results of our work. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this really was just a snapshot, an environmental scan to start to gather some information about how some settlement agencies were delivering childcare and some of their experiences in doing so. So we certainly recognize that there may be some things that we missed in this scan. We also think it offers some opportunities as a whole in terms of the results of this research to offer recommendations around ways to really identify how we can move forward with early learning and childcare for newcomer families. So first, a lot of our participants talked about shifting the framework around the framework for childcare to really recognize a broader framework for early learning. So really thinking about early learning and childcare in all that it can be. And programs describe making efforts to provide high quality early learning and childcare. And the shifts that have happened over time, and we've certainly seen this historically with childcare as a whole as well, a shift from thinking about providing support for families that need care to also supporting children's learning and development. So really thinking about the mission, the broader perspective of early learning and childcare that it can provide for parents and children, so for the family as a whole. And the opportunity, as was mentioned, to provide childcare as an opportunity, as a way to provide that wraparound or integrated support that a family needs. And we've also recognized that there have been shifts, including within CMAS, toward this broader vision of early learning and childcare. And that's really, adding on to the momentum gaining around the professionalization of early learning and childcare across the country, and the greater recognition there is in the field and the critical role early learning and childcare can play. And also in terms of the findings on this study, the essential role of childcare in settlement programs and services. Another aspect of a recommendation, so that in addition to really continuing to shift into thinking about this essential piece of early learning and childcare as a broader support to settlement, we also saw opportunities to enable greater partnerships, whether it be within regulated childcare systems within regions, or within the settlement organization itself, to really be more responsive to the unique needs of newcomer families and address the accessibility that we know is a challenge with respect to accessing childcare. We saw, and as was reported by Nahal and Melina, innovative approaches by some settlement agencies and identifying some really interesting partnerships that were found to be important. And this was really an interesting aspect of thinking about the different kinds of partnerships that might be possible, both within the agency or organization and beyond, with the province, with the municipalities, with communities, to really think about the ways that we can support families and children from a holistic perspective. Partnerships are needed across these systems, and also to think about ways that we can continue to enhance the quality and scope of care that we're offering to families and children. This could also be through new opportunities that have emerged through funding that's now available from the Canada-wide early learning and childcare agreements across the country. And then finally, it was really clear to us in speaking with settlement organizations that early childhood educators that are working in childcare within settlement agencies are really an important and essential component of the quality care that is currently happening. And we also noted that there could be opportunities and there should be considerations that we continue to think about ways that we can best support these early childhood educators through ongoing professional learning and fair compensation. So it was really clear that the diversity of early childhood educators within settlement agencies were an important aspect to the quality and responsiveness of programs and the delivery of a trauma-informed approach. We learned that there are some barriers for some newcomer early childhood educators to obtain formal early childhood credentials. Therefore, we do think it's a really important part of when we think about delivering early learning and childcare to also think about the ways that we can enable educators to access a range of professional learning opportunities, including professional development, but also certificate and degree programs. And as workforce compensation is also being implemented across the country with respect to the Canada-wide early learning and childcare agreements, alignment of compensation for educators that are working within settlement agencies needs to also be considered alongside of changes within other regulated early learning and childcare programs, so that we're demonstrating value of the work that's happening within settlement agencies and there isn't a difference or an inequity across the systems. And with that, we have our final conclusion slide. One of the really wonderful things of this research was that we learned how eager participants were to learn from one another. And we think that's also demonstrated through the high response of today's seminar and the amount of participants that are both here today and also just that expressed interest in this seminar. So we learned that organizations and programs apply a range of practices to meet the needs of newcomer families. And as I said, we're really eager to learn from one another. And we're pleased to be able to share, to be sort of that vehicle for sharing some of the stories of settlement agencies as part of this work. Organizations that provide support to newcomer families highly value diversity among their early childhood educators, which we've said a couple times now. And they believed that the cultural representation and responsiveness among educators really enhanced the experiences of newcomer families and their children when accessing early learning and childcare programs. As I mentioned, the compensation about ECEs, for ECEs working in early learning and childcare within settlement agencies, we need to be thinking about the alignment with other programs in their respective regions. And then finally, the ways that we can think about both increasing funding, but also using funding differently with partnerships across government departments could really help to advance current efforts by settlement agencies in partnership with community organizations and provincially regulated programs to better support the needs of newcomer families and children. So as we conclude this, our portion of the presentation, we're hoping we can engage in a bit of a discussion with the rest of our time. I did want to take a moment here to express a deep gratitude to our participants. I think many of them are participating here today. And we were back and forth a few times with participants to provide that opportunity to validate the information that we were reporting. We're really grateful for the response from participants in both sharing their stories and also engaging with us to ensure that our report reflected their experiences. We also wanted to thank the Child and Youth Refugee Research Coalition, or CIRC, which receives funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and also the support that we've received from the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia, the Maritime Spore Support Unit, who helped with the environmental scan components, and the broader team here at the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Centre, as well as funding from the Canada Research Shares program. So we're pretty much at the top of the hour. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes, but again, a big thanks for joining us today for today's seminar. And as I mentioned, feel free to get in touch with us in the future, take a read through our report, and we look forward to another opportunity to share out results of this work in the future. So thank you again for coming.